All right, so I guess we'll get started here. So welcome to the Technology Development and Applications Working Group. My name is Eric Coker. I'm a research engineer here at the GLRC. So my background is in mechanical engineering and mechatronics. So I have a definite vested interest in technology development, and in particular, how that applies to autonomous systems and maritime systems and how those are going to be blending together. So the format and sort of function layout for this group will be similar to the last one, whichever you guys sat in. So we'll kind of talk about a few ideas that this group's going to have overall, get some initial questions. Then we'll go around the room if everyone can introduce themselves, say why you're here, sort of what interests you in this and what you hope to get out of this. So we'll have about half an hour for that. Then we'll break down into some smaller groups and sort of get some one-on-one or not one-on-one, but maybe groups of 4 or 5 discussion. So we can kind of work together and put down some action items, some agenda items that we can work on moving forward. And then after that, we'll sort of summarize that and we'll go from there. So I guess the first thing I wanted to talk about here was the overall purpose of this group. And so what we sort of put together for this is to identify the role of technology for both respective members and their organizations. And we want to talk about how technology and varying technology levels of readiness will inform international policy for uncrewed platforms, autonomous systems, and how these are all going to move forward together. We want to talk about goals, objectives, actions that as a group we can address. Obviously, as different groups, we can all sort of work in our own siloed areas, but we really want to highlight the strengths of the group. So looking for things that we can do together that we wouldn't be able to do on our own. Another thing we wanted to talk about, are there any big strengths or weaknesses in the current technology that are held in this group that we can highlight or focus back onto? We wanted to look at the current definitions of autonomy. So depending on who you're talking to and in different areas of the world, there's different levels of autonomy that are recognized. So it would be really nice to potentially go forward in a group if you're looking for permission to test somewhere, to collaborate. You know, we have X level of autonomy, and just make sure we have a uniform definition that we're all understanding. And so when we figure this all out in this session today, and this is obviously high level, just getting started, we don't have to get too far into the weeds, but you know, we'll kind of work on putting together a strategic action plan that this group can work on moving forward. And so one of the anticipated outcomes from today's kickoff meeting is to recognize the foremost technology concerns that are going to be relevant to everyone in this group regarding smart ships or uncrewed systems. We're not just looking at Great Lakes, but in general, so ocean or inland lakes, how is this going to impact all of us in the different areas? So with that, I'll hand it over to Hayden, who's going to be facilitating today's session.
Yeah, I just want to make one sort of correction. You know, we want to talk about things on potentially operational implications on operational policy, not international policy. I don't want to frame that for you. That was kind of a theme in the policy group that we organically came to a conclusion on. So I don't want to force any you know, sort of spatial extent on you when we think about this stuff. Obviously, we're here as Great Lakes and St. Lawrence, but some things are going to be appropriate to apply on different scales, sort of in that realm. So, you know, some questions we might consider today. You know, what are the challenges and opportunities that we have in common, you know, as an industry, or can you agree on? And then really where do some of those issues differ? Obviously, there's a good range of folks in the room as well. You know, one thing that hasn't come up yet. We've talked a little bit about, you know, smaller underwater or autonomous surface vehicles. A lot of those have a sort of a science charge, right, or a survey charge, and I'm really interested in, you know, who has right of way when there's maybe a federally owned surface vessel that is using taxpayer dollars to survey, and then Interlake, right, doesn't want to move out of the way. That's a bad way of saying it. Time is money, fuel is money, etc. And we may be, you know, within a mile of the shipping lane, and in both sort of arguments are completely fair, and both of those stakeholders would lose money if they were to be the, you know, remain the stand-on vessel or the stand-down vessel. Anyway, just sort of a one interest of mine that I would like to throw out there. So then, yeah, what technology limitations are most apparent when we talk about collaboration between entities? So that could be across academia to government and so on. And then also, communication protocols and more manufacturing or R&D level standards, your IP67 type stuff. And when we talk about integrity of what might be, the main flight computer for a vehicle or something like that, what standard do we hold it to so that we as a group or an agency agree that probably, that system probably has the weatherproof chops to survive the environment it's going out into. And another question, this is kind of planted from some of my personal concerns, is are we investing maybe as a country or even more broadly in some of the support infrastructure? My answer earlier to Captain Costa about what he was mentioning, the space realm is we rely so heavily on the low Earth orbit constellations, right? And a lot of them are aging, potentially vulnerable because they are old, right? And did not exist in the time of this heightened cybersecurity sort of awareness or concern. So, are we investing, whether it's that's as a country or, as Ocean Infinity putting up CubeSats for, nano satellites for their own types of operations, or are we heading in any direction like that? Or just kind of curious to hear people's opinions on how redundant are we making our communication infrastructure that we may not work directly with because it's in the space realm. So that's kind of a pointed ending, but we'll break up into smaller groups, 2, 4, 6, 15. So 3 groups of 5.
Well, let's do the introductions first.
Oh, okay, sorry, you're right. Yeah, so I think most folks were in this room, but yeah, we can maybe.
Yeah, if everyone just wants to
Shorten that by now. I'm Hayden Henderson. I'm a research engineer here at the Great Lakes Research Center, environmental engineer by education, marine engineer by mistake, and also Coast Guard Master Captain, 100-ton your main coastal. Frank?
Sure. Thanks, Bob. Coast Guard headquarters, obviously design engineering standard, and we work on regulatory development inside this space, and we're always interested in finding out what the industry thinks this current state of technology is, and what applications are looking for using.
And then I just wanted to add on one thing. So as you go around, maybe you can all add in what interests you in this group in particular. Is there anything you're really hoping to get out of being in this working group with the Smart Ships Coalition?
With Hendry over at the Great Lakes Center of Expertise in Sault Ste. Marie. New unit within the Coast Guard tasked with research for oil recovery and sensing within freshwater and ice. So interested in how we can use not just the autonomous vehicles, but autonomous vehicles with sensors for detecting oil under ice, on ice, in ice, as well as like pipeline and stuff like that. New means of finding that.
Research scientist. Program monitoring systems. All that technology. Chris Burns with Mackinac Economic Development, Mackinac County. Yes, the island is the bridge, and also the Line 5 tunnel, and lots of marine transportation. So we're very interested in marine transportation development, implementing new technology, and certainly in our ferry boats and work boats and so forth, but also shipbuilding. And then all the monitoring, safety, and security. We're working with a lot of the federal down to the even tribal game police on marine regulation and so forth. Monitoring pipelines is kind of important to us at this point in time too.
Steve Sanchez, I'm a research engineer here at the GLRC. My background is mechanical engineering and mainly focused on just finding different research collaboration ideas that we can work on and how we can start to implement those.
Seth Perez, Ocean Infinity, interested in see what anybody else is doing with technology and what opportunities there are for technology involved. See if we can find the best bets and prototype opportunities.
ethnic kicked off in Canada, I got into technical engineering and technology, and we're just about this technology.
Eric Calvert with Maritime Services, I'm an operator of several types of vessels on the Great Lakes. Interested in how autonomous technology scales to something as large as vessels can operate, and also what kind of technology goes into that, whether it's eventually full autonomy, something that augments what our crews do now. How does that fit into our operations on that scale?
Jason Summers, ARIA, for R&D firm in DC area in Seattle. So this is really kind of our bread and butter, particularly we work mostly in sensing for a variety of different kinds of problems. Very small weeds, very large. Interested in some general cross cutting.
And Ray Hassan, I'm from DocTech. We make digital infrastructure for waterways, what's rivers, it's most technology. We have a project with the GLRC, working in the banks. And my background is in computer science and software engineering and IT. And we're focused primarily on exploring how we can incorporate our technology and help with our solutions to problem the dates.
And I'm in this group on this stuff. I'm learning how it's going. Learn a little more about the technology itself. I'm particularly interested in the communication. Question of me together.
Jeff Radcliffe, my compliance. I'm here because of the interest in communications and
John Kessler, I'm a member of the local community and retired electrical engineer. Just kind of this kind of thing because it helps keep the top.
Jim Baker, Associate Vice President for Research, Mission, and Tech, responsibility for technology organizations for business development. The scope of this, what can we do as a collective? What can we do to accelerate the translation of economic discoveries into practice? How can we push them down into one, tear up one more deliberately, more fast? How do we intersect dual use applications with lots of cool things that are being developed for ecological and environmental monitoring purposes? How do we translate data to private commercial purposes? Then how do we drive end user jobs back and so that when the outcomes of the district are ready for
Jeremy Boss, Professor of Electrical Engineering, and I focus on common systems operating structure environments. Other interested in understanding what unique portions of the maritime are interesting to choose.
Yeah, all right, well, thank you all for the introductions. I think it just helps kind of get things flowing when you know the perspective everyone's coming from. So with that, I think we'll break down into some smaller working groups and get things going here.
Yeah. And I'll just add that, we've tried to outline, just as a starting point, some kind of examples and objectives, and same as you did in the last session, picking something, identifying a timeline and metrics. You're also perfectly welcome to flip this page over and talk about the juxtaposition of open source hardware, and cybersecurity. But I mean, whatever, if you decide that sort of your burning topic doesn't really fit this framework, that's okay too. And then we'll sort of reconvene and try and distill our ideas down so that we have something to sort of share with the broader workshop group this afternoon.
And I'd just like to encourage everyone to break into groups, try and join into a group that has, members from other organizations. So you get some of that collaboration that you wouldn't normally get back at your home office or area. Then Hayden and I will kind of bounce around in and out of all the groups. So I think we want to kind of start having everyone report back in if everyone's at a decent stopping point for now. Just keep in mind that obviously just the first session of many to come, so if the topics weren't hit on our high level, that's just fine at this point. Maybe we can start in the back corner if you guys want to report out on some of the key action items or things we might want to consider, and other groups feel free to sort of chime in. We can have a little bit of back and forth and sort of discuss this.
Okay, well, we did mine on the back. I think it really puts that sure.
Sure.
So again, looking at what the barriers related to technology and their application. Since we had a representative of the shipping industry, came out a reference point. Cybersecurity, top issue. There is a need for more confidence that a ship systems can be. We need to minimize this. The adoption of technology is not going to happen fully until some of those. Transparency, so the ability to see source code. There needs to be a trusted third-party reviewer. And there's the issue of open source versus always issues there. Number two, reliability. Much of the equipment and software is off the shelf. The issue of integration and appropriate conditions. The final comment on that is ships are not customs. Customs are out on the road and crashing. And comment was about the value of life, but yeah, the ship goes down, the ship crashes into probably a much bigger issue. Third, standardization and communication protocol and hardware for all aspects of it. Currently, it's like everything we have. As industry, as our markets, move to address opportunities, everybody's got their own kind of forces. Somehow we've got to get our industries to move to this. And then finally, this kind of interspersed in our communication earlier, and that's the willingness to layer change. Still those issues that will hold back at adoption of that, both by the industry and humans.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. There are comments from the rest of the room.
So I guess with automation. So somebody's more automate. Or other labor intensive.
The company that do not.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, I in response to the economic developer, that often happens, and that means that. Support. Just like that was supposed to be.
Tim?
One of the things that I heard was you wanted this code in open source.
I think there was a discussion of the recognition that you guys jumped in there more at software and code.
I'm just saying that transparent and reliable, I think is fundamental need is for transparent, reliable code. Open source is considered as a it's there, but not necessarily. Right. I'll just give you a perspective. We want to organize. Right. And no, yes. I know. I don't want to show you what's under the command.
Well, that's the trade-off. If you want to sell your software to me, how am I going to trust your code? I'm not a computer scientist. I don't know how to code anything, but how do you prove that your code is wrong? Now, yes, proprietary information. Or if you get hacked and nobody else knows the code besides the engineers in the company, how to solve that problem. I don't know if that just posing
No, no,
questions.
it's a.
From a customer standpoint, that's would be our concerns with a particularly, not just any company, right? Who does your software, your code is good. I mean, everything's active, but.
Everything's active, the scores are having more susceptible to that.
Well, I discussed at lunch is would it make more susceptible with hacking? Probably, but would it make it easier to solve and everyone knows the larger framework of something? And like you said, nobody's gonna go open source because we wanna, most people aren't gonna open source, they want money on stuff, right? Trade off this.
So I think that, so that question is how you can build a confidence. Reduce the risk, which convince the customer you've got a better solution. than Brand X and brand Y. Because brand X and brand Y are gonna want to do the same thing, they're gonna wait, make money on their stuff. I think that.
I don't, nobody knows the answer to this question.
As a different type of consumer, right? Than like, small scale products. It's not a government. And source anyway, it's intermediate, just very large expense, very large risk. You know, so it's kind of space. Suppliers, except that's all we get after. Government owns this. Give us the source. Shots. That's so it's some balance, yes, but and more transparency.
Definitely good things to be looking into moving forward. So just kind of keep things on track and move on to the.
I just have one quick thing, because I've heard multiple times across kind of multiple arenas, the point about workforce adoption, but not one of those groups has really made a stand on where that adoption should start. I mean, is that to your maritime academies? I mean, is it on the full seafarer level? I don't know if that was discussed at all. That was, I mean, I have, maybe I heard wrong, but that was sort of the.
We didn't discuss that, but if you want to raise that issue up, I think we should better start. We actually need to do this level. Really, about earlier, we gotta start this stuff. So yes, we got to training people, future workforce on ships, in operations. It's true.
Yeah, good.
What do you guys want to present?
So I'm gonna try to distill the discussion and my colleague is gonna stop me if I go wrong. We're trying not to stay with what the coalition do. There was an action item where it's questions that the coalition can work on to come up with the answers. And so kind of first one is kind of depending on what a customer would want is define what is the biggest need in technology that customers. One of the things that we thought of with a portion to work on will be able to establish full environmental conditions and kind of monitoring those conditions for you have this vessel or whatever. Depending on space you have, if you're water, shore, maybe you can decide the vessel. Really working on full environmental conditions. And then another, the one biggest use of the test bed is kind of the pitch to potential users. Come here and see what works and see what's possible. We have so many different environmental conditions we replicate very close by that still needs to be a focus of the coalition because it's such an important asset that it's hard to find in other places. And then the other one, maybe I'll ask for help on that one, but we have an opportunity to stay ahead of regulations instead of reacting all the time. Like, well, I'll take for him for government. To do that. Anything else?
Can you just elaborate a little bit? I think it was kind of your second point about establishing full environmental conditions. I didn't quite capture the, I guess,
So
where
when
that was
we
headed.
talk about different sensors and different things, but we wanted to make sure that the vessel kind of knows where it is as best as possible. Where it's water conditions, weather conditions.
Okay.
In surrounding other, or in the sense correctly what's around. So environment is a very broad term.
But so as to collect good data on the performance in that environment.
Yeah, and allow the vessel to perform as best as possible because it knows exactly what's.
Okay.
So it's not so much working on the vessel movement and it's more the technology, what's around.
Thanks.
So rather than potentially just relying on overall weather forecasts, you could have systems right on board that are looking at these things in real time. So they know what's in the immediate vicinity, not just what's overarching for the northwestern section of Lake Superior right now, but what's happening in the immediate vicinity of the ASB.
Anybody have anything to pick on from that?
We'll move up to the front group.
Sure, well, just to take off on what they were just saying, we suggest that there be greater AIS. Automated identification systems for all marine equipment, not just ships and boats, but buoys and pipelines and so forth to help identify locations of all equipment. We think, and this is picking up on what was suggested earlier as well, that we need to have greater cybersecurity anti-piracy protocols. And maybe getting back to some of the open source stuff and so forth as well, that pirates of the future are going to be able to disable the ship's own navigation system and take it over electronically, in essence. And then the rules of the sea take over and they can go salvage it if they disabled it. So that's going to be critical. Also, more and better use of the maritime test beds. There's one here specifically that's got a designated area. It's got different types of conditions, so equipment can be tested, and it's also not very visible, so folks can keep their things secret. Somebody's talked about covering their props and things like that. We're proposing a similar test area in the Straits, which would be the opposite. Very busy, lots going on, but you can test different things in different fashions there. And so we think that the Great Lakes and Michigan in particular needs to do more of that and make more of that available so that as folks are developing equipment, there's places to go and test it and perfect it and so forth. And so that really leads me to the last one, which was my big one. That we don't believe that there's anybody from the Michigan Department of Transportation here at this conference. Is that
She was busy, she's at a different event.
so?
There is
So there are some people with marine in their title at MDOT, but Michigan, of course, we know is car-centric state and done very well with that for a long time. But it also has more coastline than any state except Alaska, and more ports than every state except, I think, California, but I may be wrong on that one. And so the state of Michigan and MDOT in particular needs to take the lead and take marine development, marine transportation seriously. And the state of Michigan needs to put greater emphasis behind that as well. That's important for the state to undertake. That's what we have. Did I miss anything?
I had one question on the talk about AIS. Did you guys talk about like really simple unpowered vessels, things like canoes and kayaks? Do you think it'd be beneficial to have sight on something like that?
Well, so we thought so it's going to have to be phased in, right? And certain things. And so for example, I mentioned, well, if we started requiring all marine engines to have that, right? Then you start to pick up outboard motors and things like that and start to phase in, if you will. And so somebody's little sunfish or canoe, may take a long time before that ever happened. Right? So, but it would be the sort of thing that you could phase it in and require it at a certain level and work it into the
Anyone else have comments, questions on that?
I'll just add that I know some of the turn buoys now do transmit AIS. I shouldn't say that. I don't know how their location's being fed into the AIS stream. But I know some of the turn buoys in the lakes, whether that's National Data Buoy Center doing that or Coast Guard, I'm unclear, but
We do have some that are just strictly AIS targets. There's nothing that physically in that location.
okay,
And then we do have some that's broadcast out. Yeah, there is a
Okay.
mixture of those within ship.
right, cool. Anyway, just, yeah.
The response, Chris, to your point on. I would link on name because it's so new, but that will have the maritime and port facility assistance office, brand new maritime specific.
What was the name of the?
Maritime and port facility assistance office. So that's why I was linking on the date.
Who started?
Yeah, it was,
See, how good we are. Just said it, now it's happening.
no, but it was, the bills the creative were passed last.
Excellent, cool. Look forward to that.
Were there any other questions, just broad topics anyone wanted to bring up? If not, I think we're 5-10 minutes before the end of our session. So if you guys want a couple minute extra break to grab something to drink or go to the bathroom, answer emails, anything like that.
Yeah.
So if you're out in that area, please try and be quiet. I think they're still wrapping up their session. Thanks everyone for participating.